Hi there, this is Brent.
And this is Amanda.
We are the Unreliable Narrators.
Here to talk about the strangeness, the mystery, and the wonder of Gene Wolfe's prose.
What is time?
What is memory?
What is a person?
Is this reality?
Where are we?
Do we exist?
Have you ever considered that all your choices were what brought you right here to this very moment?
Episode number 32. A werewolf or a thief, and the power of St. Tegla's well.
Did Wolfe write these, Amanda?
No, neither of these are written by Wolfe, and so this would be what we are calling a seaside episode. Not exactly a Wolfe-related author, but a tangential rabbit hole we have fallen down.
Yes.
So why a werewolf or a thief? And who wrote it, Brent?
Well, I have been going through old fanzines.
As one does.
Well, yeah, as one does. And what I've been doing is I've been looking for Wolfe-related articles. Sometimes he actually has essays that he composed that he sent into fanzines. There's different letters, and so I've been looking through.
So basically tracking down every scrap of published or semi-published text from Wolfe?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, this is great.
Yeah, so one of the fanzines that I was looking through, it's okay, so it's the son of the SFA journal.
Okay, that's quite the title.
It is. So there's the WSFA journal.
Okay.
And so it was a science fiction fanzine that was published approximately once a month from 1965 to 2012 by the Washington Science Fiction Association.
Okay.
The son of the WSFA journal was a supplement, and they published that a couple times a month. It was later renamed just the Journal Supplement after issue 193.
I don't know, son of sounds better, but okay.
Well,
it's a supplement. That makes it sound more like a vitamin than a child.
It was edited by Don Miller, so part of the renaming happened after he left the group. In son of the WSFA journal, number 88.
And as you keep saying it, you're getting better. Nice practice.
April 1973.
Okay.
We have a review that Wolfe sent in. So he also sent in another, this isn't even an article. This is from a want ad.
Okay.
But I have nowhere else to stick it, and I found it, so I'll just bring it up here.
All right, tell us about it.
This is number 167, 168 from November 1974. Wanted to buy November 1974 issue of Crawdaddy. Will pay $2 for a good or better copy. Gene Wolfe.
Okay.
Yep.
Do we know what Crawdaddy is? Do we want to know what Crawdaddy is?
Well, I looked it up. It's a music magazine.
Oh, okay.
I don't have a copy of it, so I have no clue what he was interested in there. But beyond the want ad, there's this review. In the review, he has Witches, Wit, and a Werewolf, edited by Janine B. Hardendorf. Let's see, I'll quote. I found these cheek and jowl in a Loop bookstore and bought both, so it seems reasonable to review them in tandem. They are very similar in format and appear to have the same cover artist, though the cover of Poltergeist is not credited. The resemblance ends here. So there's a second book, Poltergeist, and that one is edited by David C. Knight. Despite big name prose, Dickens, Lord Halifax, Aesop, Witches is a waste, a mixture of chestnuts and adapted folk tales. Not only are the folk tales ill-chosen, the folks just have to have done better than this. The adaptations can get pretty startling, as when the Vikings aboard a Viking ship go below to their cabins.
Oh my goodness.
So,
okay. Some basic historical knowledge missing here.
Yeah.
Okay. Although the Vikings probably would have enjoyed having a cabin in their longships, that's not a thing.
Well, yeah. So witches can boast of one distinction. It brings together what have to be the worst werewolf story in the world, a werewolf or a thief, and the worst miracle story, the power of St. Tegla's Well. So sorry for some of the stumbling. The text in these fanzines there's a couple misspellings even in a short section here.
So basically we ended up reading these two stories because Wolfe reviewed them as the worst werewolf story and the worst miracle story. And I think we were probably most excited about the worst werewolf story since our last episode was about Hero as Werewolf, which is a fantastic werewolf story. I guess actually our last two episodes, given that we had to make that one a two-parter because it's such a great story. And then the worst miracle story. And so Wolfe, of course, would have strong opinions on what makes a good werewolf story. He would also have strong opinions on what would make a good miracle story.
I did a little background research. So who was Janine B. Hardendorf? Not a lot about her online. Online sources indicate that she was an American librarian, also a writer of children's fiction, born in 1925, and she died in 2003.
So if we have hard things to say about her, she won't have to listen to us.
She won't. Among some of the other books that she wrote, Libraries and How to Use Them.
Excellent. Okay.
1979. Before that, she wrote a couple of books that time probably hasn't been so kind on their titles.
Okay.
So there's The Frog's Saddle Horse and Other Tales.
Okay.
There's The Bed Just So.
The Bed Just So?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Then there's Clever, 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 Folk Tales from Many Lands.
All right.
And then we have The Little Cock and Slip, Slop, Gobble.
Oh my goodness. You should have... listeners, I had just taken a sip of tea. This is terrible. Are you serious?
I'm serious.
Oh, no.
And I waited for you to grab for the tea, so...
That's awful.
And so actually it's about a rooster and a turkey.
Oh, good to know.
Uh-huh. So now most of these were published by Scholastic, which is a publisher that's known for publishing children's books. Growing up, we always had a Scholastic book fair in grade school. So I assume a lot of people in the U.S. probably had similar experiences.
Yes.
And all that to kind of say we're looking at a book that would probably be considered YA in today's publishing.
Probably.
Okay, so.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. All right, so the worst werewolf story in the world. What would you imagine would make the worst werewolf story in the world? And did this story meet your expectations?
I'm not entirely sure what I thought going in would be the worst werewolf story.
I feel the same way. I was not sure what I would be getting either. Like, is it, we live in a strange day today, and the titles of some books are as horrifying as the titles of her books. And I think I thought, oh, okay, a terrible werewolf story would be, werewolves are misunderstood and maybe sexy like vampires were. But that's not what this is at all. No, this is a pseudo-Aesopian morality tale.
Yeah, did we want to read the whole... I
assumed we would just read the whole thing. It's very, very short, and probably our listeners won't have an easy way to get access to it. So, a werewolf or a thief. There was once a thief who put up at a certain inn and remained there for several days. He was waiting for a chance to practice his profession. He waited and waited for something to come along that he might steal. Finally, one day he noticed that the innkeeper had bought himself a handsome new cloak. It was a magnificent cloak, made of the finest materials, decorated with silver threads and gold buttons. As it was a holiday, the innkeeper put on his new cloak and sat outside his inn by the door. As there was no one in sight, the thief sat down by the innkeeper and began to talk. He talked first about this and then about that. After they had talked for some time, the thief all of a sudden yawned and then howled, "Ooh," like a wolf. The innkeeper was very surprised at the man's behavior and naturally asked the reason for such behavior. Well, answered the thief, now that you've asked, I'll tell you. But first, I want you to promise me something. The innkeeper said, What do you want me to promise? And the man said, Promise me, no matter what happens, that you will keep my clothes for me. It is very important. I am going to leave them here with you. What do you mean, no matter what happens? Asked the innkeeper. I don't know why it is, sir, replied the thief, that I'm attacked by these peculiar yawning spells, which are always followed by my howling like a wolf. But I do know that after I have yawned 3 times, I turn into a wolf, one of the man-eating sort. Having said that, the thief yawned a second time and howled, "Oh," like a wolf again, just as he had done before. The innkeeper looked at the man, and he thought about what the man had said and what he had asked him to promise, and he rose up quickly, for he was afraid. He started into the inn, but the thief clutched the innkeeper by his magnificent new cloak and said, "Wait a minute, sir. I wish to give you my clothes. I don't want to lose any of them, for if I do, I won't be able to turn back into a man once I've been a werewolf." And the thief made as if to unbutton his coat with his free hand, for he was still clutching the innkeeper's cloak with one hand. Whereupon the innkeeper was even more afraid than he had been before. In a panic, thinking he might be eaten up, the innkeeper ran into his inn and locked the door, leaving his magnificent new cloak behind him. Thus it was that the thief, by pretending that he would turn into a werewolf, managed to steal the innkeeper's new cloak. Moral: don't believe everything you hear.
But
I don't even know where to start with how bad this is.
yeah, it's a groaner.
Yes, again, on several levels. So, what are you groaning about?
Well, one, I did just want to point out that yes, it does end with moral, and it's capitalized. It's like the moral of the story.
Yeah.
I'm groaning about the fact that we have a buildup.
Yes.
And then there's literally nothing. And it's a very demythologized telling of a werewolf story. And
yeah, the werewolfness or not of the thief is meaningless in the context of the story. He might be a werewolf, he might not, and it doesn't really matter. A knife would have done just as well. He could have threatened the innkeeper with anything.
Yeah.
So the frightening nature of the werewolf, there's no opportunistic, there was howling wolves around the inn last night. There's no mention of a full moon. There's nothing.
No.
And silver threads, anyone?
Yeah.
Mythology means nothing. This is like finding out that vampires sparkle and that's why they can't go out in the sun.
Wow. Are you just going to harp on Stephanie Meyer this whole podcast?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
I've never met a joke I couldn't beat to death.
Oh, woo!
I know, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so there's like the demythologizing doesn't add anything to the story. It's almost like a reverse eucatastrophe. In the sense, like Tolkien's like, oh, it brings joy. This just brings, it's not even dread. It's like, oh.
Groan.
Yeah, it's like I read these 3 pages for a twist that's so bad that it's like, okay.
Yeah, and the moral, don't believe, what are the exact words of it? Don't believe everything you hear. That is so out of context for the story. This is not like someone believed something false and then got tangled in danger. He was threatened and he ran away. And being threatened and running away is not the failure of believing something false and then being, somehow corrupted or led astray or tricked by it. He was threatened and ran away from the threat and lost his cloak.
Uh-huh.
Ugh, yes. I think I agree with Wolfe that this is the worst werewolf story I've ever read. I just don't know that there aren't worse werewolf stories that I haven't read.
I can't think of any worse werewolf stories.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially a meaningless story. A guy gets his cloak stolen, but that could happen to anyone. And it isn't from the innkeeper doesn't seem to have some internal personal failing. A true Aesopian morality fable, someone's inner flaw, someone's tragic flaw is what causes their downfall, their greed or their arrogance or their vanity or whatever. But the innkeeper, he's not shown displaying vanity with his new cloak or, tempting the thief by talking about how expensive it was. None of the typical Aesopian details that give those little fables such weight and enduring power. I don't even really like Aesop fables, but I know they work, right?
Yeah,
This doesn't work.
Yeah. I think you have to be exposed to Aesop's fables at a fairly, there's a window, a young age window where they make a lot of sense. So as you were talking, one of the things I was thinking about is, because we've done Rattler before, and then we've done the Tall Tale one, but it's come up a bit more, kind of talking about Lafferty a little bit, just for the context of the story. One of the questions I was thinking about is like, in some sense, this shares some features with the Tall Tale, where you're kind of stringing somebody along, and then the delivery is not what you're expecting. And so I was just wondering, as someone who does not like tall tales,
right,
even though it has some similar tropes as a tall tale, it lands completely differently. It's just most of the time with the tall tale, it's like, oh yeah, Groner too, but this is just different. It's just so flat.
Well, I think that has to do with just the poorness of the writing, and this will come up again in the next story. But it's very much a tell story. There is no show, and I'm not someone who requires show only. You can tell certain things, and there are contexts and certain kinds of stories where a bit of explication is it works, but there's no show of anything. There isn't a telling detail in the whole thing. Any of the actual physical details or sensory details that appear in the story are very much minimized and don't seem to be connected to anything. We don't see anything about these finest materials. We're just told they're the finest materials. And then, yes, gold buttons and silver thread, but they don't glisten or gleam or shine or anything. They seem to be simply dully existing, along with all of the rest of the physical details of the story. They sit down and talk, and it's a holiday, but what holiday is it? We don't know what the weather is. The fact that the guy's wearing a cloak tells us nothing. We have no sense of the spatial reality that they're in. We don't know why the thief is a thief. We don't know what his motivations are. He doesn't seem to have any. The fact that there are no other people around is there's no context for that or explanation. We don't know what time of day it is. Again, there's no mention of the phases of the moon or anything that might connect with werewolf mythology. All we get is that he howled, and then, our mildly onomatopoeic awoo in here, which I hope I acted out well. Having actually heard wolves howl, I know I don't howl well, but there's just, his clothes aren't described. We don't know if the thief is old or young, hungry or fat. We know nothing. And so I think that part of the flatness of the tale is that even in something very brief, like an Aesop's fable or in a tall tale, very often you get elaborate description of something that gives you a sensory anchor to hold on to in the story. So, bad writing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Because as you were going through these, it was like, oh yeah, no, I have no clue who these people are. Does the innkeeper have a mustache? I don't know.
Right.
I kind of set it in my mind in a vaguely medieval-esque.
Right. An innkeeper in a cloak, you can do that. But there's no detail that would tell us any of those things.
And yet when you ask the questions, it's like, yeah, like you could make an interesting story about a man who's not actually a werewolf, but is a thief.
Right.
But he's pretending to be a werewolf, because the implications of just that outline are very rich.
Well, I did set out then, after reading this, So I first read this a few months ago after you had discovered it and sent it along with many negative exclamations. And so I set out to write a story where there was a werewolf whose werewolfness didn't matter. So, because that was the main thing I took away from my first reading of the story is it doesn't matter whether he's a werewolf or not. So if it's okay with you, I think we should attach maybe on Patreon or something. I wrote a short story about a character, and spoilers, it doesn't matter that he's a werewolf. It's not a great short story, but I was like, okay, well, you could write a short story where there is a character that is or is not a werewolf, and his werewolfness doesn't matter, that I hope doesn't land as flat as this does. I also did not append a moral to it. So maybe I'm just going to win because I didn't put a moral lesson or explain a moral lesson at the end of it.
No, yeah, we should put it on Patreon.
Okay.
I look forward to reading this. I haven't.
Yeah, Brent has not read it yet.
Yeah, this is the first I've heard about it. And then also your comment where it's like you didn't append a moral to it. So you may. Now, I'm not going to say this is unique to Wolfe discourse because I see this in the print SF subreddit and like fantasy and
right.
But it feels like, and maybe this is just an American impulse.
Our Puritan ancestry coming through?
Maybe, where it's like, oh, well, reading fiction is a waste of time.
Right.
So if we can interpret the story so it's giving us some sort of moral edification, then therefore it becomes not frivolous.
That's Sir Philip Sidney, his defense of Poesy, which is a defense of essentially fiction writing, which is that the purpose is to delight and instruct, and that those two purposes are wedded together. That the point of fiction is that you are delighted by it, and also then you are learning while being delighted.
Huh. Well, on one hand, I wouldn't even necessarily disagree with that. But then I'm like, well, if I don't disagree with that, is my complaint that some stories are just for morally obtuse people.
Right. So this is the, created, the scale of created beings. It goes beyond what we could imagine. So there are beings that are as above moral instruction as there are other beings that seem to need the most didactic and literal and explicit moral instruction.
Because I don't necessarily disagree with what
Sir Philip Sidney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then
defense of Poesy.
But it seems to me like if you're one of those people that just looks up a word in a dictionary and then is like, there is no nuance. This is what the dictionary says.
The literal meaning.
Yeah. It's like, oh, it must instruct. And sorry, I'm thinking of Martin Luther, like keeps hitting the chalkboard where it's like, my body. It's
Or he carves into the table, est, is est, like is means is. Yeah.
So yeah, it just I don't know.
See, I do tend to agree with Sir Philip Sidney that the purpose, or in a sense, the purpose of fiction is to delight and instruct, because life is infinitely complex, and understanding the infinite complexity of living as a human being requires such a rich array of experiences, and a human life is insufficient for those experiences, and storytelling is insufficient for those experiences. And so we need all manner of representations for us to have even a hint at the complexity of what it means to navigate the created world. And so instruct in the sense that I want to see 100,000 models of human behavior in order to form a sense of my own possibilities. Yes. If by this we mean, just to pull an example at random, Severian, bad example, bad character, don't read, evil, torturer, rapist, bad, then this is not going to work for me. And if it means write a story and then tell me what I'm supposed to understand from it in one sentence, then that's too low.
Yeah.
I think a 3-year-old needs something more complex than that.
I'm not going to disagree with that one.
Are we ready to talk about the worst miracle story?
Well, I did this. This is just a little snippet that I can't really slide in anywhere else.
So before we talk about the worst miracle story, Brent, do you have anything else to add?
Well, when I was trying to look up biographical information for the editor, Google now comes up with the AI overview on some of your searches.
Hate that, but yes.
Oh, I hate it too, but I had to chuckle at this one.
Oh, really?
Yes. So the Google AI overview. If you had to choose between a werewolf and a thief would generally be considered the less dangerous option, as a werewolf is a mythical creature that transforms into a dangerous wolf-like beast, while a thief is a human who steals things, typically without causing physical harm.
Oh, my... I am sorry. This is... Okay. Well,
I'm handing out flyers for the Butlerian Jihad right now.
You know what? I am ready to, give me Maytera Mints Azoth and let's go.
Ooh, okay.
Wow, that is so bad.
Yeah, so like I said, it doesn't really contribute to our conversation, but I thought it was so ridiculous.
Well, I will never miss an opportunity to complain about the inshittification of the internet, just as I will never miss an opportunity to express my gratitude to Cory Doctorow for giving us such an excellent description of what has happened and is happening. All right, well, we need miracles. Will the power of St. Tegla's Well help us?
Spoiler, it will not.
Oh, no.
I mean, possibly.
Okay. I don't know if we want to read the entirety of this one. It's a little bit longer. How about a summary?
Yes, I can summarize it.
Okay.
A farmer has a child, and the child is sick, and he knows this because of all of the horrible signs. So it's like an apple tree goes to blossom long before its time. There's a rooster who starts crowing in the middle of the night. There's dreams where the mother is dreaming of a wedding, but because you always interpret dreams as opposite, it's like, oh no, it's got to be a funeral. The night bird shows up. So there's just there's all these signs, and so the father goes to a minister, and they go to this sacred well.
St. Tegla's Well.
Yeah, and so they have these things to perform where they have a rooster, and they're trying to transfer the sickness over to the rooster. So it involves like putting a coin on the altar and troping around the well. And once again, we get to the end, and in the morning, he placed 6 pence on the altar and left the cock in the church and went home with his father. They waited anxiously to learn the fate of the cock, for if the cure was to work, the boy's ill luck should transfer to the cock. In a week, a messenger brought the word that all had gone as was needed to effect the cure.
Yes, all had gone as was needed. Okay, but what happened?
Yes. But then it just, whether this was so or not, it is curious that in spite of all the signs to the contrary, the apple tree which bloomed before its time, the night crowing cock, the corpse bird flying against the window, the sight of the ugly old hag in the well as the corpse candle, Robert Williams' son William lived to a ripe old age.
Yeah.
And it's another one of those, it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. And it seems like the author doesn't think it matters. The author doesn't care if it matters or not. It's like, here are a bunch of people who were influenced by superstition to believe something terrible was going to happen, and then influenced to go and try and conduct a ritual to stop that thing from happening. The thing didn't happen, and we don't know or care whether there was a miracle here or not.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And
groaning.
Yeah, and it's just so hard because then the way it sets it up is it's like, oh, well, it didn't happen. Well, it was never going to happen.
Yeah.
And then if it did happen, then that would be proof against the well, like actually being a sacred site. And it's just.
Yeah.
So one thing on this story. This is a retelling. It did appear in a Welsh fairy book.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, so by 1908 by W. Jenkins Thomas.
Yes, and there's apparently not a lot known about Saint Tegla. The only thing that I found is that she's often conflated with Saint Thecla. So who's a much more powerful saint and has apparently people have better luck in praying to her. So maybe this was all here, existing here, so that the character of Thecla could be more interesting by contrast to the dullness of Saint Tegla's well.
Maybe. I was wondering about that because I found a similar thing when I was researching, and I was like, oh, well, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
It also is interesting that this well is an actual well.
Right.
You can go online, and there's a website dedicated to, so apparently there's a couple of those sacred wells
right
in the area. Now, one thing as an American, when I'm saying well and I'm thinking a medieval well, I'm imagining
right, like a stone columnar circle with, like a windlass to lower a bucket down in.
Yeah, and that's not what these are at all.
No.
It's basically a pool that's lined with some rocks, but
right.
If you were walking along and weren't paying attention, you might just think it's
might just walk right by it.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not they're not as dramatic as you would imagine, or at least from the imagery I have. That's probably more informed by fantasy and fairy tales than actual traveling through Europe.
History. So, right.
The other thing, too, is that the well, it has been somewhat forgotten over time. But then there's also there's a similar well in the Devil in the Forest.
Oh, yeah.
Like at the end. So it's kind of a forgotten little sacred well.
Yeah, so it seems like Wolfe took relevant details and then did interesting things with them. But unfortunately, this is just not an interesting story. There isn't a theme or a meaning, much less the kind of many layers of meanings that are interesting in a story. I don't get a sense that the author has a narrative perspective on whether or not any of these signs and symbols are actually bad luck, or whether the characters are superstitious, or whether there's anything going on here or not. Like an apple tree blooming out of season, we get neither a mythical nor a naturalistic explanation for why that would be a bad symbol.
Well, and especially where, okay, so this isn't in the same area, but there's the hawthorn,
right,
in England that, according to some legends, Joseph of Arimathea planted, and it blooms at an inopportune time. Yes. But that first blooming is taken as a miracle.
Right.
So it's just, that was in my mind as I was reading this. Right. It's like, well, okay, is it an ill omen or is it a good omen? Or my sense is that the author just didn't care, and it was kind of from a very anti-superstition. I don't know if modernist is the word I'm looking for.
Right, but then without anything in the narrative to undermine the superstitious perspective, other than just that flat, well, whether it was or not, like whether this magic or miracle really happened or not, the kid lived to a ripe old age. But you're not given any evidence in the text of either the defense of the supernatural perspective or an undermining of the supernatural perspective. All you're really given is hey, let's not be interested in this perspective.
Yeah. Oh, that's yeah. That's the thing. There's not a lot to sink your teeth into with these.
Yeah. I say they're bad stories.
Yeah.
They neither delight nor instruct.
Missing Sir Philip Sidney's defensive posy.
Yes.
I read through a few other of the stories in this book. I honestly, they're short stories, but I honestly got bored with them fairly quickly.
Yes, they are extremely short stories, but they are not interesting.
Yeah, and they all have a similar flavor to this, where I think one of them wasn't a ghost was the storyline, and then
A
there's
ghost story without a ghost in it.
And then another one was I think treasure hunting without a treasure.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so
basically life is meaningless. Here's a nihilistic perspective, and we're not going to tell you to go ahead and jump off that cliff, but you might as well, because there's nothing good to read anymore.
I don't have anything else on these. Do you?
I don't think I do. But given that we have discussed and read 2 terrible short stories, I think it's probably time we gave something to our listeners. So, a couple of months ago, I'm not even sure the timing of it, Harlan Ellison's Last Dangerous Visions finally came out. And in typical Unreliable Narrator fashion, both Brent and I ordered multiple copies, one for ourselves and one for the other, because this is just how we do things. And so we ended up with an extra copy of Harlan Ellison's Last Dangerous Visions. And so we'd like to give it away. We are probably going to be very good at this, but we're going to do our best. So, listeners, if you would send us an email at wolfnarrators@gmail.com, don't forget the E in Wolf, wolfnarrators@gmail.com, or join our Patreon. You can subscribe for free and just give us a message, send us a message telling us who your favorite non-wolf author is. We will select one of the respondents. We'll give you, after this episode releases, we'll give you guys about a month to message us. And then we will select one of you in some form of a random way. We promise to be as random as we can about it. And we'll mail a copy out to somebody. Sound good?
This sounds good to me. I like the idea of asking Wolf fandom of other authors they like.
Yeah, their favorite non-wolf author. I mean, I don't know. I'm suddenly putting you on the spot, and this is a terrible question to ask in a way. It's terrible to ask of our listeners, so we should answer it as well. I don't know that I could pick a singular favorite non-wolf author, so I will name a favorite non-wolf author. Can you do the same?
Yes, I can.
All right, go, Brent.
Willa Cather.
Willa Cather. Ooh, that's a nice, unexpected one.
Yeah.
Anyone who knows me very well at all already knows the answer to this one, but Jane Austen is a pretty easy one for me to say. Not saying I don't love lots of other authors too, but she's clever and insightful and a favorite. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was either Jane Austen or Stephanie Myers was my.
Oh my goodness, you're horrible.
Am I?
Yes. No, and Willa Cather, I think you are a Willa Cather character, but we'll have to have listeners read the entirety of her catalog and then send in their guesses which Willa Cather character they think that Brent is.
Oh, I'm not. I'm not even sure where you're going with that one.
You're not?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, that's okay. I could just be making things up. The Unreliable Narrators are Amanda Patchen and Brent Towell. And as Gene Wolfe said, reality is more incredible than anything that can be made up by poor imitators like me.